notification.
Yeah.
You hate the state, huh?
Kind of. Okay. All right. Welcome to the Children of the Lie podcast.
No, has it
number
started? Hold
3.
on, has it started?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it started.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Number
go
1
ahead.
podcast
Nice.
in all of Politigram. Shut the fuck up! I swear to God, I'll gulag you. Presented by your host, Mixed Capitalist, alongside 3 retards of the Marxist tradition: Mouthy Infidel, Porky, and the Communist. Our eternal guest, Son of Albion, is not present right now because he's somewhere in Spain, like a retard. And I guess you can hear that my microphone quality is 30 times shittier, and that's because I'm on vacation. I'm using my earphones and not a studio microphone. Today we're gonna be having 2 guests on. Max, Canadian communist, right? Or
No.
I think he's joining. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's
What?
joining in the middle. What? Yeah.
sure. And we're also gonna have an anarcho-capitalist. I forgot his name. Let me just. Yikes. We're gonna have an anarcho-capitalist called K-Rod coming on later. So as always, your host, Mixed Capitalist, same Insta name. Go on, Mouthy.
Okay. Wait, I'm sorry. What was the question? Sorry, I was reading a message from Max.
What's your name and what's your
Oh.
Instagram?
Mouthy Infidel for both.
Very basic. Go on, Porky.
Hey. My name is Porky.
Are you? What's your name? Hey. Are you eating something?
Yeah, I'm eating.
Not very communist of you.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
You know, the Soviet Union
No.
had a higher calorie intake than the USA.
That's
Oi,
just
oi,
not
oi,
true.
oi, oi. Yes, shut up. Don't kick him.
No, it's not.
Who?
Quite literally not. They did not have a higher caloric intake. They
But
had
yes,
similar.
they did.
They were
They
consistent-
actually did though.
No, they were consistently
Yes, they did.
lower. but
Listen,
they were
you're
on
wrong.
par. No, it wasn't. Every source you've ever seen.
Okay, introduce yourself. Oh my God.
Okay, sorry. Introduce yourself, Porky.
Oh yeah, I'm Porky, and my Instagram name is Just Try It Porky. Yeah, you should follow me. Yeah,
No, you shouldn't.
yeah, follow me.
I was up, Venice.
Yeah,
My name is Venice. My Instagram is the communist, and you should follow me as well.
Yeah, you should actually follow. He's in.
No, you shouldn't. No, it isn't.
For everyone fucking listening, I just spent the last 2 hours arguing with Porky about everything. So there's a little beef between us right now.
No, it isn't. We love each other. I promise.
There's also a lot of beef between me and Porky as well. I stole his
There's
oil.
also-
He
a lot of
stole
beef.
Azerbaijan from me. That fuck.
Tajikistan. It was my oil. Mine.
No,
Okay,
it's
guys.
mine.
Okay, guys. They were playing. What's the game called? Heroes of Iron.
Hearts of
Iron. Hearts of Iron 4, and they're just mad because they're incels.
Shut the
It's
fuck
just
up.
a province with oil. It's no
My
big deal.
province. I needed it to invade Britain. You fucking
No,
cretin.
you don't. It's just
Yes,
a
I
good
do.
bag.
I'm good and you're bad. That's simple.
Okay, let's calm down.
You're so good that you need oil
Yes, you fucking
from
need oil
the
to build
USA.
a fucking Air Force
From the
and
USA.
Navy.
No,
I can't.
you don't need the one from the
oil.
USSR. Okay, calm down.
Done. You
Guys,
need
guys.
oil in the United States.
All right, guys, let's bring it back to the topics at hand.
You
Alright.
don't need oil from the USSR to invade Britain. It's just that you're so bad.
Yes, I do.
Okay,
You fucking idiot. Of course you have a navy to destroy the British navy. Otherwise, they will fucking rape you. You're dumb. I had to have oil, and I didn't have oil when I invaded the Soviets, so that's why I needed Afghanistan. You fuck, you piece of shit. What do you need oil
I mean,
for? You had all of Africa. You didn't
no,
need
you
guys.
oil.
absolutely need oil. You just
Guys,
don't need the whole thing.
Can we, guys,
Shut up,
guys,
shut up.
guys.
Okay, enough.
All right. Okay, so what's
Enough.
the first thing we're gonna talk about?
Okay, I was thinking we could just go straight to the Democratic primaries going on in the United States.
Oh, epic.
Yeah, sure.
Currently, the list stands. The top Trump cards at the moment: number 1, Bernie Sanders,
Hey.
polling tied with number 2, Joe Biden, and then
Ugh.
Kamala Harris, Beto
Ugh.
O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg,
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Christian Gillibrand, and Julian Castro.
Yes.
Castro.
Imagine
yeah.
having someone named Castro leading the United States.
Well, that's pretty epic.
Kamala
Uh,
Harris is number 3, which is really surprising given the fact that she's a cunt. But you know,
Whoa.
Jesus Christ.
Whoa.
what? Dude,
Let's calm down here.
Dude, she has fucking draconian drug policies, man. She literally left people in jail, like
Yeah,
for
but
smoking pot.
the Democratic Party has kind of been the touter of draconian drug policies for years. I mean, look at Biden. He's the other one of the other front runners, and he's voted for several tough on crime bills. Voted for the war on drugs. Was a huge advocate for the war on drugs, etc.
I know, but she was a fucking district attorney. Like she actually had power over the judicial system. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's
Also,
epic.
another person who I was expecting to be a little bit more popular is Elizabeth Warren. Right now, she stands about like under Cory Booker. So
Where's
that's less
Andrew
than,
Yang?
like 5%. Andrew Yang isn't even the top 10, man. Andrew Yang is like not popular at all.
Yeah,
What the
his popularity is just massively overinflated by like the internet community, I think.
Exactly. He's not
yeah,
popular at all.
exactly.
Like, have you guys ever heard of Christian Gillibrand or Cory
No.
Booker or Amy Klobuchar?
Yes,
No,
I've heard
it just seems like there's such a general disconnect from like the youth and the general population at this point, like culturally speaking.
Exactly. The only fucking Dem candidate I actually kind of like is Tulsi Gabbard, to be honest.
Oh,
yeah. Because
No,
he's so anti-war.
Did you hear her comments on Julian Assange?
No,
What did
is
you
it
say?
based?
It was pretty
Wait,
based.
I'm getting a call, guys. You guys go on.
Okay. Basically, Tulsi Gabbard said that the fact that we're trying to arrest or extradite Julian Assange is just testament to the fact that the government essentially is trying to silence all journalists who don't toe their narrative or whatever.
That is very epic. I guess
Yeah.
we could talk about that as well, Julian Assange.
Yeah, how do you feel about Julian Assange?
I mean, I would assume that all of us agree, but he is pretty homophobic, xenophobic,
Is he?
and also he got accused of rape,
Is he homophobic?
which is actually in my town, in the
Oh my gosh, don't listen to him.
from
He's
what I've heard,
lying.
yeah.
He's lying. He's lying.
From what I've heard, yeah. Also, he got accused of rape, and he got accused of rape in exactly the same town that me and Porky live in.
Well, that's
That's
pretty.
a lie.
That's
It's
pretty
a
crazy.
No, that's not a lie.
Yikes.
Be quiet.
Well, I don't know. Like, Julian Assange, I think, is probably a bad person. I don't really know a lot about him, but I know that he got, like, part of the reason that the Ecuador embassy claimed that they gave him away was because of like, what did he, like, not feed his cat and, like, was not cleaning up after himself and so on, and was like mistreating the staff, or at least that's what they claimed. I don't know how much.
Not only that, he also
about
like not only that, he was also like refused to. He did something like he hacked the security cameras within the Ecuadorian embassy. He went through their network database. He also did some shit to
Epic.
They said that you're not allowed to use the internet for any political reason. I did it anyways for years. And also, apparently, he was smearing feces on the walls, and like he abused a security guard.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that to believe though.
No, exactly. Like,
because it seems like they have, like, when we're in a situation where every like powerful person in the world has every reason to try to assassinate his character and so on, I think we have to be skeptical about them doing just that. Like, we should be skeptical about the claims that are made against somebody who very powerful people have every reason to try to.
Yeah, but like, except when they
Slander.
say about Stalin, then we should trust them on everything they say.
not only shut up, Porky. You're an actual fucking dickhead. Anyways, you shut the fuck
Oh
up.
my god! Oh, I see the beef is still hanging around.
Okay, but the thing is, like, I kind of believe the Ecuadorians though, because did you know that like Christopher Hitchens wrote an article back in 2010 saying "Turn yourself in, Julian Assange."
Oh, really?
Yeah, and essentially in the article, it's Christopher Hitchens saying the WikiLeaks founder is an inscrutable megalomaniac with a political agenda, and he's like calling out Julian Assange for being a terrible person, for like being an actual dickhead, for like having an ego and stuff like that.
Oh, that's a big yikes.
Plus, he lied about having STDs in Sweden. And
Yeah,
he
I didn't
gave
know about
women STDs. Yeah,
That's pretty wild.
it's pretty whack.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that regardless of his character, I think
He's
it's
done a lot of good things.
yeah, definitely. He
Yeah.
he exposed war crimes in Iraq. He exposed the meddling in the and this is something that really bothers me because people always say there's this big take on the left. Like leftists used to love Julian Assange, and now leftists hate Julian Assange. And it was
the whole
all
Hillary
because
Clinton thing.
Did they?
yeah, it's because of the Hillary Clinton email thing.
Oh, my
And it's
lord.
so ridiculous because they claim that he meddled in the election. No, he didn't meddle in the election. The DNC meddled in the election. He just
Exactly.
exposed what they were actually doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was exposing
Like-
how they were treating Bernie Sanders unfair.
Exposing what people are actually doing and showing transparency and honesty is not meddling. The
Well-
dishonesty in the first place was the meddling.
Wait,
Exactly.
wasn't there also like a conspiracy that Russia gave him that information?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't really think it matters because it's valid information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not even proven. Like that's just purely speculative. Fucking Russia seems to be the boogeyman of like every leftist these days.
Yeah, it's weird
Yeah,
because it used to be the other way around.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's weird.
The most ultimate, like, okay, back in 2012 when they had the presidential debates between Obama and Mitt Romney, they asked both of them, like, who do you think is the United States' biggest enemy? And then Romney said Russia, and they all started fucking laughing at him. And like Obama straight up with a classic line said, haha, Romney, the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back. And then the Democratic
Proceeds to
Party-
commit war crimes.
Exactly, and the Democratic Party 4 years later blames Russia for fucking everything, dude.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Well, yeah, but I think like leftists, like not like center leftist, but majority of like leftists don't actually have this like, oh, Russia is the boogeyman of the world, and there is like it's because of Russia that we have all these problems.
Well, yeah, because there's really no leftists in mainstream politics. I mean, liberals, sure, but
Yeah,
that's a very different.
but to be honest,
form
I
of-
think Russia should just fucking take over the world. Like I would rather live on the Russian than fucking the Americans. I mean,
Jesus Christ.
I wish they hacked the election.
Why must you hate markets so much?
What?
Why must you hate the market
Huh?
economy so much, Porky?
Wait, didn't you claim that the United States was a corporatist country?
Why do you hate freedom, Porky?
Why do you hate freedom? No, okay. So
Yes,
why
why do
don't
you
you
hate
love
freedom,
America?
Porky?
I don't know.
Okay,
I just don't like
so
people.
okay,
being free.
okay, listen, Porky.
You know what, Porky? I may
reason-
not know what communism is, but I know what iPhone Venezuela is.
Okay.
Okay, listen, yeah. Property.
Oh my god, Jesus.
Okay, listen. Okay. Whenever someone brings up a market failure within the United States, and then whenever I say, okay, no, but that's an example of corporatism. I'm not saying the United States is corporatist. I'm saying that like many industries within the United States and big parts of the economy is corporatist, in terms of there was like huge government intervention. There's huge collusion between corporations and the government. But there are also other markets which are relatively free.
It seems that it is in the interest of capitalists to gain influence in the government. I
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've never denied that.
Yeah, I just think that the argument could be made that corporatism is kind of a natural extension of capitalism. in a
Exactly.
way.
Yeah.
You could make that
Yeah.
argument, but then you could also bring up countries in which that's not necessarily the case. Like, for example, if you look at Sweden, there's not a lot of corporatism at all. Like, we don't have a lot of government corporation collusion. I think that's mainly a byproduct of a more like expansionary government.
Mhm.
Like, for example, if you look at countries like Hong Kong. Okay, okay, don't shout
Oh
at
my
me.
god.
If you look at the country like Hong Kong, it is
Take a
quite.
shot every time he mentions Hong Kong.
There's
And
not a lot
Singapore,
of,
and Singapore, and South Korea, and Japan. Okay.
and
Well, I think-
Singapore. If you look at those two countries, there's not a lot of corporatism except for the housing industry that goes on, and that's mainly because of the powers of the government.
Everything bad is corporatism, and everything good in the country is capitalism.
Well, okay, so
Damn straight.
No,
I
no,
think
listen.
if you look at countries like Sweden and Denmark, I think you could say that corporate. I would agree with you that a lot of the times corporations collude with politicians for regulations and such, which disproportionately benefit the top. And I think this is obviously not in the interest of the workers. And I think the reason that a lot of countries like Sweden and such have been able to mitigate this is because they're very, very heavily unionized and so on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, sure. Not only that, I just think that different countries also have different lobbying laws. Like, for example, in Europe, I don't know why the United States doesn't do this, but in Europe, it's quite literally illegal for corporations who just like mass donate, or like super PACs and stuff are pretty much illegal all over Europe.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And therefore, it just makes it 1,000 times harder for.
Not in Eastern Europe.
Sure, but is that really Europe though?
Yes, that's half of Europe.
Mix, how do you feel about campaign finance reform?
I definitely think it's good. Like, the libertarian part of me says, like, oh yeah, any company should be able to donate any money they want to, like, any money they want to any candidate, right? But then it's kind of like, if I want to achieve a libertarian society in which the state and the economy are two separate institutions, how do I maintain that?
Right.
So perhaps it's not the most libertarian idea to say that there has to be like campaign finance regulations, but it's like the classic line, it's the price we pay for a libertarian society, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm a lot more of a consequentialist, and I believe that the consequences are better if you have campaign finance reform.
Yeah, definitely. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. Where, like, if you look at the laws in the U.S., like politicians are literally allowed to make laws regarding sectors that they hold stock in. Like, it's just like it's pretty
fucking retarded.
Yeah.
No, it's the Venezuelan government that is corrupt, not the American one. Fucking
do I need to fucking like recite you like Venezuela's economic failures, Porky? Are we cool here? Are we fucking cool here?
Not Venezuela debate.
Venezuela. I can't believe it.
70% of the workers are actually still owned by private companies. Shut the fuck up. You little fucking retard. Shut up.
What do you mean? Shut up.
Shut up, you bitch. Shut up. I will come to your house and I will slap your sister.
I don't have a sister.
I will make you a sister.
Slap her. Jesus
Enough with the
Christ.
beef. Enough with the beef.
Oh shit.
You know, okay, so
He just admitted that he will slap a newborn.
No, he just admitted that will go have sex with your mom and then
Slap a
the
newborn.
thing. What? It doesn't have to be a newborn necessarily.
Well, no.
You could just wait.
But you implied it.
Dude,
Well,
Daniel is so hardcore
well,
libertarian. He argues for child abuse.
Wait,
what
what's this
is
podcast
the-
in
Do you
this
guys
podcast?
do you guys believe
Yeah, I
that?
shouldn't
Do you guys
beat up my child.
do you guys believe that? Do you guys believe that spanking your children can be necessary sometimes?
Yes.
No.
What?
I'm Asian.
I don't know. I haven't read a lot of parental psychology, so
Okay, so
I mean,
we actually started talking about a little bit of parental psychology and like negative and positive reinforcement in my psychology course. And every study shows that spanking is bad, but you know, sometimes you just gotta beat the fuck out of your kid.
You know, maybe I'm empirically wrong, but I like beating the fuck out of kids.
Wait, I just gotta
mean,
check.
the thing-
It's corporatocracy, not corporate. Shut the
Bro,
fuck up.
I'm gonna listen to these scientists trying to trick me with their big words about why I shouldn't beat my kids.
It's just big pharma lying to you.
These scientists saying that they should vaccinate my kids.
I love that like mentality. Like, have you seen that Flat Earther documentary on Netflix where that guy's like,
Yes,
the
oh my
reason-
god, I fucking love that. I love
He's like,
it.
the reason we're winning against science is because science just throws math at us, and it's like,
It's so good because this guy was just like, you know, science just throws math at us, but you know what we use? We use logic. Like when they throw numbers,
What?
we're just like, hey, look, it's Seattle over there.
Oh my
Yeah.
god!
I just love that mentality of like, whoa, they're using big words in math that I don't understand. I bet they're lying. Like,
That's like
It's such
every
a
right-wing
weird-
position.
Wait, I don't understand why this is. It must be false. That's the flat Earth mentality.
You know what they did?
If I can't understand it within 10 minutes, they're lying.
They spent
Yeah.
$15,000 on buying like a really expensive what's that called again? Like GPS system, like an actual fuck what Mouthy, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Are you talking about the experiment?
Yeah. So essentially, okay, so you know the thing inside GPSs, which is like kind of tells you where you are on the planet. No, it kind of shows you like what angle you're in, you know. So they're like, oh, if the planet is really spinning, then this GPS thing will like in an hour it will spin 15 degrees. But if the Earth is flat, it won't. And then they tried it. They spent $15,000 just to tell them that it changed by 15 degrees. And then they were like, oh no, this has to do with heaven energy. So they put it inside of a fucking like calcium box or some shit, and it still showed 15 degrees.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So
why? I mean, why does Netflix even give a platform to those
Oh, I
people?
wish we could have had Pierce's party on today to talk about
Oh,
flat Earth
yeah.
with us.
But I don't think we ever will because he's a big pussy and he doesn't want to do it in English.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. You know how we agreed, like, oh, we're not gonna laugh at him.
Yes.
My plan essentially like promised him we're not gonna laugh at you, and then as soon as he said some shit, I was just gonna start fucking laughing so hardcore.
Yeah, that was exactly my
so
point.
hardcore until he leaves, and we have all this live.
Daniel's like throwing up in the bathroom from laughter.
So that,
Like the first time Pierce's party says anything, Pierce's party's like, well, so basically I think, and then Daniel's just like puking.
Yeah, he said when I asked him for proof that yours is fun, he sent me a Bible verse.
Oh my god, dude! Is it when he said, "Oh, the four corners of the earth"?
No.
It's funny that he would invoke a Bible verse about the earth is being flat to prove that the earth is flat, because like I usually send that same verse to people to like explain why the Bible is invalid.
Well, anyways, what do you guys think about Iran deeming the American army as a terrorist organization?
Epic.
I think it's
What did
Like,
you say?
do you agree with their decision?
I agree with the decision.
Well, okay.
Why?
Okay. How do you define terrorism? I guess.
Well, that depends, but generally the definition is like using political violence against someone for political purposes.
Well, I mean, like by that same definition, isn't like almost all armies inherently terroristic then?
Well, not really.
well,
Like,
I
okay,
think
any
all
army.
armies given the right power will turn to imperialism and subsequently terrorism because of the capitalist mode of production.
But like a normal terrorism, like we can just use this definition. Like terrorism is violence against civilians, like innocent people, for political views, for political reasons. I mean,
Well, I mean, like by that definition, then like most armies are terrorists, aren't they?
no, what? No.
Well, I don't know. Like, I think by any definition of terrorism you go on, the U.S. Army occupies nothing like the moral high ground in any respect within any conflict. I mean, like, we were just talking about Julian Assange while you were on the phone, and I mean, he was the one who is releasing videos of actual war crimes of the U.S. intentionally targeting civilians in Iraq and so on. And and these are, I think these are really, obviously on their face, they're very egregious acts, like targeting civilians and so on. But I think that you do have to look at the consequentialist perspective and say, okay, well, what is the motive? Like, what is the end goal this army is trying to reach?
I want that oil, bro.
And when it comes to the U.S., it's all about expanding profit. So I don't think there's any argument to be made for the moral high ground of the U.S. regarding profit or regarding a motive or regarding the actions which they use to actualize these motives.
So guys, if an American soldier is captured in Iran, will they then just treat him as a terrorist?
Yes, yes, they will.
No, they will treat him as terrorists. But the thing is that, like, even terrorists, when captured, they still have like they're still protected under the Geneva.
Iran.
Are you sure?
Okay, not Iran, but I'm just saying, like, you know, most.
Have you heard of Guantanamo Bay, bro?
I'm just saying, if you're in the American army, you don't want to get captured by Iran. You will probably be tortured.
Well, I mean, like, if you're in the Iranian army, you don't want to be captured by the by the U.S. either. Just look at the way they treat. Just look at the way they treat "quote unquote" terrorists in Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like Iran has much harsher policies than like people they deem like as enemies of the state.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
There was this like funny headline which I saw a couple months ago, which is what's the leader of Iran called again? Let's go with
Hassan Rouhani.
Oh,
You know,
Khamenei. It was like Ali Khamenei says that U.S. authorities are retarded.
That's actually so bad.
That's true, though. That's true. That's true.
I don't know. It was funny as fuck.
It's true.
Why is Iran so based?
You know, I think that regarding Iran and so on, I think that a large pitfall that the left falls into a lot is that they look at Western imperialism and the problems that are the result of the Western imperialism, and they look at places like Palestine or Hamas specifically, rather, and places like Iran, and they begin to start to justify the actions of these regimes because they were propagated by like U.S. imperialism, and I think that's something that the left should really be careful of, because I think that like looking at products of imperialism as a means to justify their actions, I think that's a really dangerous trap to kind of fall into.
Well, like it's like defending their actions. If you say like, yeah, sure, Hamas is terrible, but like if the Americans or the Israelis never did this, they would never, like, Hamas wouldn't even exist.
Oh, for sure.
Like, yeah,
but I just think that like. I just think that like he's just trying to say that you need to be careful with how long you go with that.
Yeah, that's
well, yeah, there was this like entire bandwagon on supporting Assad, but I think
exactly.
But I think there was there was merit to like defending Assad, because like the amount of just bullshit they were like sending to like Assad literally like tortures children and rapes them and shit. Like there's these claims to these big facilities of like torture facilities, and none of these things were proved. Yet the West, like the media, like the mainstream media, was just all buying it up and just continuing the bullshit about Assad, and basically just like saying, everyone, we should go to war with him. Everyone, we should go to war with him. Right. So I think like many leftists, like Jason Under, like these big communists, like went on Assad's side there. But I don't think that necessarily means that you defend Baathism, like because you defend Assad from imperialist lies or Western lies.
Exactly.
Sure, but I mean, like,
exactly. You don't defend Nicolas Maduro's politics when you take his side.
Right. Yeah, in the conflict that's happening. Like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm pretty sure like all communists disagree massively with Nicolas Maduro and Assad, but some would like defend them because they're just targets of imperialism, right?
Okay, but okay. One thing, first of all, I think that Malti has a point when he's saying that we have to be careful with how long you go with by that logic, because if you extend that logic far enough, you can kind of blame Nazi Germany on France, because like, oh, that would have never happened if France wasn't so unfair to them in the Treaty of Versailles.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you need to
there's like a lot of parallels to Nazism as well with these regimes.
I mean, it doesn't justify the thing that Nazi.
Wait, that's true though. Like, yeah, if the French weren't so harsh, the Nazis wouldn't like.
But that's true. Though. That's
yes. Right? It's true that you can take that logic and therefore say the French shouldn't have been so hard on Germany. But what I'm saying is that you shouldn't take the logic of Germany or Nazi Germany wouldn't have risen up if the French weren't so hard on them, and then use that logic to justify the actions of Nazi Germany.
But who is doing this though? Like, I've not seen.
No. Nobody is doing that. We're just saying that's like the logical conclusion. Like the conclusion.
And actually, I've seen a lot of leftists actually doing this when they say like we support Hamas and so on. I've seen a lot of this rhetoric, whereas Hamas is a regime which has openly stated that it wants to wipe out all Jews from the planet. And so I think it's really, really dangerous to sort of justify the actions and the words of these regimes by saying, oh, well, it's Western imperialists' fault. Well, yes, but we can't like
Okay, but with this logic, like, yeah, so the Allies and the Axis were at war, right? They were both terrible regimes. Like, the Allies did as many war crimes as the Germans. They committed mass genocide in Africa.
Okay, well, I think you have to be really careful about that.
But yet, they were much better than the Nazis, which systematically targeted minorities and intentionally mass murdered them, right? So, yeah, sure, you defend the Allies in this situation, but that doesn't mean you support the Allies and everything they stood for.
Yeah.
So I think if you're just taking a side, like in like a two-side conflict, like isn't necessarily meaning like, oh yes, I go along with everything.
No, I agree. I'm just saying I think that while we can recognize brutal regimes such as Hamas as a product of U.S. imperialism, I think we have to be careful about using that explanation to justify their existence or openly support what they're saying. You know what I mean? Like
because support Hezbollah and shit, which is so fucked.
Who?
Hezbollah.
Who supports them?
Leftists.
Hezbollah.
Which leftists?
Wait, what? I have never seen a leftist actually.
I've never seen this. I have never seen this.
Dude, there's literally leftists in my class who are like, no, I support Hezbollah for their
sure. Like,
for their campaign against Israel.
We're talking about like a major movement of like leftists supporting like a specific.
No. I'm not. I'm talking about like individual leftists, not like actual movements.
Yeah, but sure. Like, but there's so many. Like, there's fucking like Nazis that support the Soviet Union. Like, what? Yeah, sure.
Dude, Porky. Fucking communists. This isn't like some major fucking argument against this is like Marx got it wrong in 1848. This is just like an anecdotal like analysis, bro.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I guess you're just critiquing like people like reactionaries' views.
Yeah, I'm critiquing like individuals. I'm not saying and this is why you're wrong on your centrally planned theory.
No, I don't think you are, but I'm just saying like usually we talk about these things when they're like a major movement and stuff like
sure.
We talk about fascism when it's like getting prominence, right? That's when we really criticize fascism. So I was just thinking like, okay, yeah, then I guess there's this big movement of leftists supporting these dictatorships, but I haven't seen that yet.
Dude, let's be honest though, fascism was like low-key based.
I mean, they were against the West.
What? No, they weren't. What the fuck?
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, they were just like, no, we want to be the West. Like, okay.
Daniel's falling into the libertarian to fascist pipeline.
Exactly.
How do people do that, by the way?
Okay.
Dude, I don't know, dude. Yeah, go ahead.
So a lot of people become libertarians, right? So they're like, I want a society free from coercion. I want a society free from socialism and communism and stuff like that, right? And then after a few months or a few years, they're like, oh shit, but how do you maintain a libertarian society? And then you start to think, and then libertarians start to think to yourself like, you do this through like, democracy will inherently like turn any system socialist. So then their conclusion is like, we must have a fascist state in order to protect individual liberty.
Correct. And accept communism.
I think that
shut the fuck up.
A big problem is that what I've seen time and time again is when libertarians start to when libertarians kind of start out, they're already to an extent accepting the bourgeois model of society, right? Well, they're entirely doing that, and so like, and a lot of them have like very like social right wing temperaments. I mean, look at Brian, for example, an Orthodox theory who just became a fascist. He was like, I mean, he's an alright guy, but he's always been very anti-egalitarian. He is, in the whole race realist thing, and basically looked at these differences and these problems in society. And when you start to accept this right-wing social model of society, you begin to understand like, okay, well, how do we enforce these differences and so on? And then fascism kind of emerges as like the one solution.
Well, I think that those are like, there are different strains of libertarianism. Like, for example, I think that the types of libertarians who adhere more to like John Locke philosophy of like essentially all should be equal under the law, and that like inequality is natural, but everyone is still like worth equal in terms of like the under the eyes of the law. I don't see those becoming fascist. I mainly see like more like paleo libertarians becoming fascist.
Definitely.
Kind of like, I'm a libertarian economically, but I believe in like God and the church, and like I believe in like strong national identity and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those people are extremely apt to becoming fascist. But I have a problem with this group. I have such a strong bone to pick with like the social conservative group, because if you look at the rhetoric, it's like, oh, look at these degenerate gay people, you know, having these crazy parades. Why are they so erratic? Look at all of this degeneracy. Look at all of these women rebelling against their traditional roles, you know, like what's going on here? Like, okay, so here's the basic premise. So if you allow women to do what makes them okay. So let's say that the socially right-wing model of society is correct. Women are happier at work. People are happier in nuclear families with 2 children, and so on. Okay, if you let people do what makes them happiest, free of coercion, that's what they're going to do. Like, if this is what really makes people happiest, that's what they're going to do. The problem is, the reason we have these movements which are rebelling against these roles and being so quote unquote degenerate in the first place is because of the social and political enforcement of these rules in the first place. Like, if you just didn't try to enforce these rules in the first place and let people do what makes them happy, they would naturally fall into these roles on their own. But enforcing them makes the people who don't want to abide by these rules feel like they have to rebel against it, creating this culture, this counterculture that these same social conservatives claim to be so degenerate and harmful to society, which justifies their fascism for them. It's just so like,
no, I agree with you 100%. Like, I think that a lot of this, like, how to say, anti-traditionalist, anti-conservative, like, extreme feminist movements are just saying, like, oh, yeah, fucking burn your bras. Oh, yeah, you should do everything you can to not be, like, a house mom, like, how do I say, stay-at-home mom and stuff. It's an inherently reactionary, like, when I say reaction, I mean, like, as a reaction to something.
Exactly,
you know, it's a reactionary movement against the conservative social situation that's occurred in the first place.
Yeah, like, if you didn't try to enforce it, they would just they would fall into these roles which you advocate for them being into on their own, if that's truly what makes them happiest. And if it's not, then they won't, and our whole premise is.
The thing is, I know what the counter argument by these conservatives would be. That would be most, like, 100%. The media, though, is making, like, all of the media is, like, saying you should be gay. They are pushing this evil narrative of everyone should be gay and everyone should chop their dicks off, and we should have this, like, non-traditional. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yes, it's this big counterculture movement. But the only reason, that's the key word, is counter. It's a counter to something. It's a counter to the enforcement of these rules in the first place, right? Yeah. Like, if these rules weren't, like, socially enforced, if gay people were never socially stigmatized and alienated, there would be no LGBT exclusionary culture, or at least not this counterculture we see today, because they would be integrated into society. The alienation of LGBT people from society is what caused this counterculture movement of the LGBT community and this quote unquote degeneracy in the first place.
I fully agree with you.
Mouthy.
Yeah.
The Jews.
But homosexuals are pretty gay.
You know, and like all of the evidence points to this premise. Like, I take the premise that if you give people the freedom to do what they want to do, that'll make them happier. Like, we don't even have to take this premise dogmatically. This is just objectively true. Like, I don't know if you saw, I had this post a little while ago. It was a quote of Benito Mussolini saying, "The truth is that men are tired of liberty." But, like, this is just empirically true, right? Like, according to the General Social Survey in 2000, only 7% of Americans who feel that they have complete or a great deal of freedom report being unhappy. The percentage of Americans who say that they have a moderate amount of freedom or less freedom who report being unhappy is significantly larger, 23%. Data collected from the International Social Survey of 2002 finds that among nations, freedom is directly correlated with happiness. Data collected from the World Happiness Report shows that there's a direct correlation between political freedom and happiness. Like, it's literally all of the
everything.
Like, I could turn on for like several minutes, but all of the empirical evidence on this subject directly points to the premise that giving people more freedom to choose their own course and so on will allow them to do what makes them happiest and will lead to a generally more happy population.
100%.
It's insane how you can remember all this.
But no, but the thing is, like, this is how, like, they will argue. Like, they will fully agree on, like, this premise, but they will just say, okay, but people aren't really free when choosing to be gay or transsexual, or whatever. They're influenced by this evil social justice warrior narrative and this evil, like Hollywood and media, and all of them are tricking people into be transsexuals. And then they, like, after a while, like, fascists would just say it's because the Jews are tricking us to doing this. Not like more like people that hide themselves, not trying to say, like, yes, I'm a Nazi, I think the Jews are doing this. They will say, like, but it's the social justice warrior people in Hollywood and the companies, and they're trying to trick people into being this social justice warrior people. And I think this is, like, the main argument the conservative right uses, and I think it's completely based on this view that the media only cares about like continuing social justice warrior views, which is just not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but but I mean, you could still, like, go even deeper and say that, like, okay, the media is telling people they have to rebel against this, normative culture, this culture that's, like, encouraged or run by the media or whatever. Or the media is telling people they have to rebel against this culture, which is exclusionary only to a certain group of people, and you should fall out of these roles to rebel against being in this normal culture. But the problem is again, if this normal culture, which excluded people who were different in the first place, didn't even exist, there would be nothing to rebel against, right?
Yeah, sure. And also, here comes the argument, like, corporations don't give a fuck about, like, if society is progressive or not. They only care about profits. So if it's profitable to have this, like, left-leaning view of, like, socially, like, left-leaning, they will of course take it, and they will not allow Nazis on their platform.
Yeah, I just did an essay about this in English just now. Like, I legit did it today.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys like corporate virtue signaling and corporate greenwashing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like, at the end of the day, corporations only care about maximization of profit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I don't think that's inherently bad. Like, okay, let's just get them. But
I think everyone agrees. I think everyone agrees.
Sure, but nobody gives, like, corporations don't give a fuck about, like, progressive social issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, look at Nike.
Exactly,
Like, when they did the whole what's his name again? The football guy that, like, nailed down.
Yeah, I forgot his name.
Sure, his name.
Colin
Like, when they did
Kaepernick.
the whole campaign. Yeah, Colin Kaepernick. When they did his own, like, campaign thing, they fucking knew they were not going to lose profit. Like, no corporation is going to stand on a social issue which is, like, going to make them lose profit.
Yes.
So this was obviously a calculated move. Or, like, for example, Volkswagen, when they campaigned that, like, oh, we're a green company, we're great for the environment, and then it turns out that they had that whole emission scandal when they were terrible for the environment.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't give a fuck. They just care about maximization of profit.
And the thing is, like, in the societies where, like, everyone is much more conservative, like, I'm just gonna bring up, like, fucking Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, all corporations in those places were much more, like, you can argue, like, yeah, because, like, party members of the Nazis were, like, corporation, but it doesn't matter. Just any society where the people are more conservative, generally the corporations are also conservative, right? They send out shit, like, that's much more conservative, but that's because they only care about profit and want to side with majority of the people's views, basically.
Yeah. Well, but of course the right-wing fascist types are going to blame it on the Jews and their ethnocentricity. The weird thing about this myth of the Jews and the ethnocentricity is, okay, so I think it's pretty well established that Jews, whether due to environmental or genetic factors, have on average higher IQs. It's really, you can't really deny this. And so, but it's also true that people with generally higher IQs are generally more liberal. Like, that's literally just a fact. That's literally a substantiated fact. And I think it's
what do you mean by liberal?
And it's not because, okay, so liberal is defined by being more open to experience and more fiscally and or socially liberal on questionnaire questions and so on. So, and I don't think that it's this, like, oh, well, liberalism is the more valid policy, so smarter people are going to follow it. I think it's that higher IQ is correlated with the trait openness to experience, and openness to experience is correlated with liberalism, because people who are more open to experience are going to care more about other races and so on.
When you say liberalism, do you mean, like, economic or social liberalism?
Much more so social.
Okay, because I was thinking, like, how would that make sense in terms of economics, you know?
Right.
But I agree with you. There is a correlation between higher IQ and openness to experience, like, for example, other cultures and how do I say, they're less scared of experiencing new experiences, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It's like
So that makes sense.
conservative means like conserving from change. Like,
Yeah.
that's literally like the whole thing. Like
Slow change, right? Conservatives like having slow change or no change at all, right?
I just want to say like
this is due to Matthew,
did I cut off?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I'm gonna say, so what I'm saying is that like the fascist types have this claim of the Jewish the reason that Jewish people push these narratives is because they're more ethnocentric and these narratives benefit them. The liberal claim, or at least my claim, is that Jewish people have are just generally more liberal because that's just how they are. They have higher IQs. They're more open to experience. And so I think if you really look at this claim objectively, it starts to become really clear. Like, so for example, the claim that Jews are just naturally more ethnocentric doesn't really add up, seeing as how Jewish people literally have the highest rates of intermarriage of like any ethnicity. So
yeah,
like,
that's true.
Like they marry outside of their race more than any other ethnicity. And what that points to is the fact that, yeah, they're just more liberal. They're not trying to like, it's not like in a matter of ethnocentricity so much of a matter as just their natural political tendencies.
Reality is a leftist biased. Is this what you're saying?
That's true. That's true.
I don't think inherently leftist. I think he means liberal.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like.
Well, social liberal is pretty leftist if you want to consider.
No, it's fucking not. Dude, I really fucking hate when people make societal issues a left versus right thing.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of is, though.
It's not. Because if you it depends on how you define
speaking of this,
right?
we should use this to transition into the free speech debate.
Oh yes, okay, free speech debate.
Wait, are we not the guests when are they come?
Oh yeah, right. Can you add Max for the call?
I can try. I don't have like a ton of time, so like I don't know if he's gonna be able to join today.
Hold on, he's messaging me.
I promised his ANCAP guy for 2 weeks to join.
Mouthy, check DMs.
Okay.
So can we have this ANCAP guy? I promised him for 2 weeks he can join the podcast.
Yeah.
Sure.
It'll only be 10 minutes.
Okay, what's his email?
Let's just have them on.
Sending you his email.
Okay, two things.
What is happening?
Max told me to check your DMs.
What'd you say?
Because Max wants to jump in and have the debate about Stalin.
Oh my lord.
Okay, Max,
let's have the debate about Stalin.
Yes, Porky.
I don't know if I have time to listen to Porky and Max scream about Stalin for literally like 2 hours.
Okay, can we do this next week?
It won't be screaming.
It's gonna take forever though, because Porky like that's like his main thing.
I will.
I think we should organize this. I think we should organize this as like an actual debate.
Exactly.
Rather than like
I sent you the ANCAPs guy's email on Discord. Can you add him to the call?
Yes,
so how long do we have left?
We can just do like the ANCAP debate, and then that'll be.
But that'll be like 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yeah. We're only gonna do 10 minutes. Like, I'm not planning to spend too much time with the ANCAP dude.
Okay.
Come on.
So then we can. Well, then we can have Max on.
Sure.
Just have the ANCAP guy on or something. Like, come on.
Okay. Wait, Mixed. Where did you send the ANCAP guy's Gmail or whatever?
Go to Discord in general.
Okay.
Wait. Wait. So the Max debate. Like, I will have a debate with him. Like, just like separately from the podcast.
No, we will have it.
We'll have the debate on the podcast, but it'll probably necessitate like a full episode.
Yeah, that's what. But the thing is,
I cannot have it now, though.
Oh yeah, I've never. Oh yeah, never mind. I just realized I've never like fully like made full arguments defending Stalin. That's pretty weird.
Okay.
I've never posted it. Like I've never posted it on the internet like publicly.
I invited him.
Okay, cool. Let's see if he joins.
Who did you invite?
The ANCAP guy.
If he doesn't join, we just have Max on.
Give it 5 minutes. I'm like, hey, we're adding you. Get on Hangouts. He's like, hey man. I'm like, hey man, join the call.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, do you wanna?
Is he like? Is See, like ANCAP Society, because that guy's kind of pretentious.
Wait,
ANCAP Society, dude,
Oh my
he really
God.
pisses me off.
He's like, oh my gosh, he's impossible to debate. Like he just like he's so loaded. Like, what'd you say?
No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's my own echo. But anyways, that NCAP Society, he uses such loaded terminology. Like he just says all these things like it's self-evident that we own ourselves. Like you can't just say that. What do you mean by self-evident? What do you mean by ownership? And what do you mean by the self? Like you can't just like say all of these things like they're like just given. You know what I mean?
It's quite lazy, yes. Let's see if he's.
Guys, I don't want to be mean or anything, but I don't want to debate on anarcho-capitalism. Every time I've debated on ANCAP, it's actually been like borderline torture for me. Like it's so cancerous debating anarcho-capitalists.
Why?
They're just impossible to get to. Like every point you make, they ignore it or something. Like they will just fully ignore any factual based argument you use, and they always lose it. Like, don't worry, we'll work because companies are great and love freedom.
No, it's because unlike you, they're deontological and they're not consequentialist.
I don't know what any of that's.
ANCAP morality is really dumb. It's just it's inconsistent. It's loaded.
Is it though? I think it's extremely consistent. Like it makes internal consistent.
I think it implies too many objective existences. Like it just implies, or it just acts as if the premise that we own ourselves is a given premise. And like, first of all, I don't think the self is even a valid concept. And to the extent that it is, we don't have any ownership over it because free will isn't even a really valid thing if you break it down, like objectively speaking. Like, I just think it assumes all of these like metaphysical existences that aren't actually valid concepts in reality.
Well, I mean, like, that's why, like, it's metaphysics, because it's not natural, and you can't really disprove it as you can prove it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, like, deontological. Like, most ANCAPs are deontological. They're like, yeah, sure, even if it's a worse society, it's better that we don't violate each other's rights, because these are our moral values. So even if you were to send them a study, like, for example, I saw this one podcast of this,
what is rights, though? Like, that's the problem. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I saw this one podcast of the guy who's going like, yeah, like I admit to the point that if you have more guns in a society, there will be more shootings. But it's still, I'm deontological because I believe that everyone has a right to have guns. And like,
yeah, sure, that's like that argument is much better than like, well, actually, guns don't actually increase crime rate. I promise, guys.
They don't.
They do. No.
No, they don't. No,
they decrease. I think they decrease gun violence, but I think they increase overall violence. Like
they don't.
In the UK, they banned guns, and yeah, gun rates fell. But then people were just shanking each other in the streets. And
exactly.
No. Wait. Every time policies are implemented to make it easier, like to make access to guns easier, violent crime always increases.
Why Chicago, London, New Orleans?
I don't know like the specific examples, but if like studies, like meta studies, that have taken like the entire United States and taking policies like basically making it easier to get access to guns, and it usually like leads to like higher violent crime. Like when,
but even with like,
I mean, citation needed for that one, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I have to find it up.
But even like increased regulations on handguns and even increased regulations on rifles and stuff. There's now like ever since I think like 2015, there's been like a huge increase of violent crime in the United States overall.
I mean, if you look at like if you look at like Britain. After the implementation of like gun bans, violent crime just increased. I mean, if you look at Australia, the trends didn't really change at all.
Aggregate homicide didn't go down.
The Australian
economics based
gun buyback program, or what the fuck it was called. It was successful. It was massively successful. Majority of experts said that it definitely lowered violent crime.
The trends didn't really alter in any statistically significant way. I mean, it just kind of continued on its regular trajectory. And when you compare it to New Zealand, which was a country which had like identical trends, which was very close.
Well, I don't know what you're using. Well, I don't know what you're referring to. But generally, like majority of experts on that like policy generally agree on that. Yes, it was successful and violent crime decreased because of
No, but that's the problem with looking at aggregate statistics. It's like because there's too many confounding variables on why that happens. Like in the very same way that Australia's homicide rates and Australia's gun violence rate decreased, that was actually a global international decrease in aggregate homicide during the 90s. You know?
You say that, yeah. You say that.
Oh, hey, the NCAP's here.
Oh, hello, NCAP's here. Hello.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going good, man. How are you going? How's it going for you?
How are you going?
Shut up.
Pretty good.
Good,
introduce yourself, man.
Kind of sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Kieran.
Yeah,
sure.
Tell us a little bit about your beliefs, what you are, what you consider yourself, and why you are that.
Oh, well, I believe that for my way of ideology, right? I'm a anarcho-capitalist. I believe in voluntary, interactive contracts between people that give consent, and I wish to have a society based on freedom and liberty, and I want people to cooperate based on explicit rules that they can agree to without being forced upon by other people.
And why are you an ANCAP?
Because I care about freedom and liberty.
What made you become an ANCAP?
Because he cares about freedom and liberty.
Yes.
I used to be
let me ask you. If tomorrow we found like information that like 100% guarantees that if we had no freedom for people, we will live in a utopia or borderline utopia, would you then like abandon freedom and liberty on the basis that people will we will be on a borderline utopia?
No, because I still would support it, and I would find a way to make myself free along with others.
I think that's a false premise, though, Porky.
That is a false premise.
What do you mean?
I think that like you're saying that like imagine a world in which freedom doesn't exist and it would be utopia, and it would be a utopia, but that kind of destroys the whole reason that we believe in freedom, because that's not the case historically and empirically. Like freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. But I'm just saying, like, does he value freedom and over like the well-being of people? Like, I'm just asking.
Okay. So do you value freedom because of its utility?
Yeah, I know that.
Transcendentally.
Oh no, like I support freedom because like I care about the individual, so I feel like that the individual should have power in making their own decisions based on what they believe in.
But so are you more of a like deontological? Like, are you more deontological or a consequentialist?
I haven't gotten so big into those terms, but I just
okay. Do you believe like freedom is good because it's morally right, or do you believe freedom is good because of its consequences?
I believe freedom is good because it's morally right, and people should be free to make their own decisions, and we should hold people accountable to the individual level.
So, for example, if I were to tell you that, like, not on the same as Porky's premise, but what if I said, like, okay, but people would have a higher quality of life if they had state-provided police, courts, and national defense? Would you then still be for abolishing the state?
Oh, yeah, definitely, because I don't believe that the state can offer that type of... like those type of benefits, because it's oppressive and nobody has ever consented with their rules, and people's relationship with government is like to my perspective a very negative cooperation with them, because all they do is commit violence on those that don't consent to their rules, and they can't show proof for it.
So well, you say that you care about the individual, but like, what if some individuals don't deserve to be cared about? Like, take Porky for example.
Coming up.
Listen to Porky talk and tell me he deserves rights.
Yeah, I mean, like, just listen to the fucking commie talk. Do you think?
Like, I don't like communism. Like, I truly hate communism. But I mean, let's just say in a free society, if a person like Porky wants to have his type of ideology, you can have it.
I disagree.
I definitely agree with you, Malfi, but it's just like, you can't change everybody's beliefs. So if people want to exercise it and see how it works in their own view, then they have to actually do it in order to learn from their own from their own beliefs.
Well, I think that we have an increasingly good technology. I mean, we have pictures of a black hole at this point. How long do you think it'll be until we can just shoot people like Porky into this black hole? And
I mean, like, this is one of the main. Well, this is one of the main reasons why I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, because I just really want to throw communist swine out of helicopters.
Dude, this is why.
No, throw them into black holes.
This is why national Bolsheviks exist. Because
Yeah.
Stalin didn't kill enough.
Yeah.
Oh, yikes.
But I have a question for you. I'm sorry, what was your name again, or however would you like us to call you?
Oh, my name's Kiernan. Kiernan.
I had an Irish friend called Kiernan. All right, so Kiernan,
Yep.
would you accept that the definition of freedom is the lack of coercion?
Yeah, I'll be right back. Hold on.
All right, Martha. Yeah. Or how would you define freedom?
I would define freedom to do. I would define it as the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you're not aggressing on anyone else, right?
Okay. So, but don't you think that in an anarcho-capitalistic society, you would have more coercion than in a society that, has a national defense court system and police, and a police system?
I would have to disagree with that. I believe, at least for what I believe in, I try to believe in, voluntary, solutions. So, if people want to have certain ideas that may be a problem, then people should, hold those people accountable, and people should work together against those negative ideas. So that way we can have a reputation-based system to hold individuals accountable, or any service or agency that decides to become chaotic to other people's lives.
But I mean, how would you enforce property rights in that case?
Oh, well, for me, I don't have all of the answers.
I get it.
But it's just for instance, other people have stated in certain libertarian circles to say okay, well, let's try to have something like a DRO, a dispute resolution organization, where they constantly compete to make sure people's property rights, or basically whatever is enforced at a contractual level. So that way, if there is a problem, both sides can actually have their own DROs that they subscribe to, along with their private courts and whatever, to make sure that there is a possible balance between both parties.
But sure. Yeah, but it's kind of if you can't afford to subscribe to a DRO, or if you can't afford to pay private security, would a society in that case not come to the logical conclusion that poor people don't have property rights?
I would not want to have somebody be poor, so I would try to help that person out to make sure that person can be sustained. But to that logical result, I don't think anybody would ever want to think like that, because if I care about that person, you care about that person, then let's help that person up, so that way that person can be taken care of instead of letting them die.
Sure, but it's kind of don't you think that that's maybe, how do I say, maybe that's a bit too idealistic or too naive, that somehow there will be no poor people within a society?
No. That's why that I want to see problems, so that way we can fix it and we can find better solutions to actually, see which alternatives could be better for those people.
Sure, but why aren't we seeing that kind of reach of voluntary charity happening today?
Oh, because because the state restricted that a long time ago. For instance, for America, we actually had these things called friendly societies. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
no, I don't know.
With friendly societies, they actually helped people who are poor, people that lost their job, people that were sick, that were about to die. They were mutual aid societies that actually volunteered to help people out, and actually give them these, mutual aid services that were provided by pretty much, people that created free market institutions, basically, to aid them. And people, were helping each other out, and but the government didn't like that because our poverty rates were actually going down by the mass amount of basically friendly societies that we created. So that's why Lyndon Baines Johnson came up with like the pretty much like the Medicaid, the welfare, right, and like all those other state provided services to keep up the poor because like he didn't want people to become independent away from what the government. So in order for let the state to hold their power, they wanted to create more poor people to keep them under instead of having let the free market get rid of all those problems and try to keep it to like a very lower percentage. And I think that if we went back to that, that would definitely had helped like most of what the issues that we see today.
But I mean, like, what incentive does the government have to keep people poor? Like, I don't like. Why would Lyndon B. Johnson want to do that?
Because he did not respect people's freedom to cooperate with one another. Like for instance, like with like the like basically with like the welfare state, that like literally destroyed so many communities. Like you could take a look at like the highly urban populated areas like New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, Watts, California, Los Angeles. Like these urban cities were used as tax farms to keep poor people poor. So that way they can't be responsible and they just keep running back to the state to just keep asking for more benefits. Because if you really think about it, why is it that we are trading most of our like taxes just for more social services? Well, it's because that poor people just want to be more dependent to the state. That's why our SNAP food benefits are going up. That's why that welfare keeps going up. And then guess what? When things like UBI comes in, which it's already happening out in New Jersey, that's going to corrupt our like pretty much our debt. And then people are going to run out of money, and then it's just going to turn into a economic disaster from my own perspective.
But it's like I really doubt that like any government would purposely keep their citizens impoverished, because having a poor populace is terrible for the economy. And also, I really doubt that Lyndon B. Johnson or whatever politicians back then voted for increased welfare to keep people dependent. Like, if you just look at like more lefty movements right now, like, do you really think that Bernie Sanders wants to implement more Social Security because he wants people to be poor, or do you think it's just like this misguided goodness of their own hearts?
I think he's misguided because if you take a look at everything that was privately run in America, we were actually doing way better, where people actually had higher, incomes over time, and we managed to help people out, like through voluntary, like cooperation instead of just using the state to just force everybody to pay taxes for things that could easily be provided through like.
Okay. What are we arguing about? Sorry, I'm back.
When was this? I'm just wondering, like, what time period was like this? What was the time period you're referring to?
Lyndon B. Johnson, that was like in the 70s, 60s. After
No. This was like during like the 50s and 60s, before and after Vietnam.
Okay.
Yes, I just don't know presidents.
I have a question for the ANCAP. Wait, what are we calling him?
Kiernan.
Yeah. Kiernan. Okay, I have a question for Kiernan. So I kind of just walked in. I'm not entirely sure what we were arguing, but I just wanted to question him because I hear a lot of this rhetoric about ANCAPs regarding how they're ANCAPs because they don't believe in coercion and so on. But how do you feel about the fact that the abolition of the law of value, which is the what communism entails, in no way inherently requires any coercion that is greater to any greater extent than an ANCAP society would?
I have no clue, but as far as like what I would like to see, I would like to see, as far as like to like the level of like a legal system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, well I believe in polycentric law system where people can have explicit rules based on consent that they agree to, so that way these legal systems can compete with one another, so that way people can have a fair court and a fair judge that they pay for, so that way when they walk into the room that the judge stands up for them, not like the other way like around, where when you walk into the room, then like the judge forces you to dress up all nice, and then if you say something back to them, then they put you in jail for one night or try to throw more extra punishments on to you. And it shouldn't be like that because, like, you know, like you're paying them their salary. They're not paying you.
How would a private court system even work?
I mean, if you just take a look at like pretty much like my favorite example is like ancient Ireland. They have this court system called Brehon Law. Even like websites like Mises edu, right? They actually talk about that, and how they did it was that, you know, people would privately, like, you know, own these courts, and people would subscribe to them. So if somebody were to do wrong, like, you know, I don't know, like let's just say someone robbed someone's house, then people would, you know, go to their court, file it, and then they would make sure that there is, you know, a payout for this person's stuff, and then this court would be incentivized to go after this criminal. And if the criminal didn't decide to pay up his debt, then he would be ostracized, he would be blacklisted, his rates would go up, like, you know, wherever he goes, and people would know who he is because his reputation has gone down. So he's not going to come out of his way and start robbing more people's houses because he's already well known. So what you have to do is that you have to economically deprive that individual and kick them out. So that way he understands that his life is basically his life is no longer valued in this community. So,
but it's like, what if the entire community is like bandits and like they're raiding other communities?
As far as what?
Like, if you have an entire community that is corrupt, or you have an entire community that is like under banditry, how would the court system work against that?
I mean, like that's something that I tend to have some issues with too. But I mean, as far as like trying to work up against that, I would say people should definitely work together with those type of institutions to hold those people accountable. So that way, you know, there is a reputation-based, you know, system where people are held accountable based on their actions, and people can make sure that they trust, you know, the certain people that they want to be with. So that way, but the bad people, you know, their trust is pretty much at an all-time low, and they can't really get as many resources or as many connections with people because, you know, they're already labeled as like a bad person. So their notoriety is already going down, and they're going to become a much bigger target by other communities that actually know like who they are.
Okay,
but it's kind of like, yeah, go on, Matthew.
Okay, so I guess my question for you is that you take this position, which is taken by, you know, pretty much every ANCAP, where you justify your position of being an anarcho-capitalist by saying that you deontologically believe in freedom and so on. So, like, my point is, like, so why do you choose anarcho-capitalism? Because for me, there are other ideologies, you know, mutualism, anarcho-communism, which require no more coercion than anarcho-capitalism to any extent. And like, really the only difference is whether you're keeping intact the law of value. So why do you believe in keeping intact the law of value? Because I don't think that just saying you believe being free from coercion is narrow enough to define why you're a certain ideology. Like, why don't you believe in the abolition of the law of value?
I've never heard anything like that. But like, as far as like where
value,
I've never heard anything like that, honestly.
Oh,
what?
So do you know what the law of value is?
Like I said, like I have no clue. Like, you know, I've never really heard of that.
What?
He doesn't know what the law of value is.
I don't know what the fuck the law of value is.
Yeah, like
stop being an asshole.
I'm not being an asshole. I'm just saying.
I'm just.
How the fuck is the? I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Like, how's the ANCAP supposed to like argue against you if he doesn't know what you guys are talking about?
Well, okay, so the law of value is basically the system which normalizes generalized commodity production, wage labor, etc. So, like, why it's essentially like markets, you know what I mean? Like, why do you believe in markets as opposed to no markets in an anarchist society which is free from coercion?
Well, as far as what I believe, like I believe more in the like natural law, like, you know, making sure that, you know, you leave me alone, I leave you alone, and
Well,
people.
The natural law entails property rights, and you obviously don't believe in the enforcement of private property rights. You know what
Yes,
I mean?
I do.
And
I
I mean,
can.
wait, so how are you an ANCAP then?
No, because ANCAPs have a different definition of property. Essentially, they define property as everything you can defend.
Okay, so you are in favor of workers overthrowing their CEOs, their the people who run their workplaces if they believe they're being exploited.
No. That's
Well,
that's
then,
going.
okay, then who's going to enforce the property rights of the owner of the company?
That's simple. You have private security.
What? Oh my god.
But
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think he's talking about hypothetically, like, what if they're able to, let's say, pay off or able to overthrow private security?
I would not advocate for that.
Yeah,
Like,
but
I know, but wouldn't that
You-
be like maybe a consequence of an ANCAP society?
okay, well, like, let me ask you this: who would ever have the intent as a business to overthrow any other businesses?
well, wait. I think he's just saying, like, what if the workers just really fucking hated their boss in this
If you-
ANCAP society? And sure, the boss had private security, but let's say just the workers should fucking destroy them and kill the private, like the capitalists, and they can now defend the property they own now. Like how?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and just more generally, my problem is like the society you're laying out. Like I say, how are you going to defend property rights? Well, you use your money to hire private security. Okay, so you're basically creating a society in which there is no law which is enforced and held accountable by the people, in which those who have more currency have more influence over private security and hence force and so on. So you claim to have this value of the individual, yet this completely sort of goes away in the society you're laying out, in which the rich and the
You're cut off, Mouthy.
means of production.
Mouthy, you cut off. You
so
cut
on.
off. Mouthy, you cut off.
Oh, did I?
Yep.
Okay, so basically my point is that you claim to value the individual, and you claim that, oh, you value freedom and so on. But the problem is this completely goes away in the society you're laying out, practically speaking, because you say, oh, how are these people going to defend their property rights in the absence of government? Well, they're going to defend it by hiring private security. Okay, so people basically have influence and have the right, not only the ability, but the right to enact force upon the workers if they have more money and so on. So basically, you're laying out a society in which those who have more money and influence have a monopoly over society and can use force to propagate that without retribution or without being held accountable to a state or to the workers, etc. So it seems like, you know, like I don't know, like what are your real values here?
Okay, well, first, I do not believe in any of those things. I believe in property rights, and I believe that.
But enforced by.
Wait, say that, please.
Who is enforcing the property rights?
Nobody's going to enforce property rights. The only people who you're saying are going to enforce property rights are private security. Okay, so if the people who are enforcing property rights are the people who are bought off by the people who have property, then people who have property and essentially money have sort of a monopoly over force and over society and aren't held accountable by a state. So like practically speaking, while you claim to believe in freedom in the individual, these values sort of fade away in the actualization of the society you advocate for.
I disagree with that, honestly.
Why?
I don't think a business like Walmart will ever come out of their way and try to form anything like that, because if they do, then Walmart will lose a shitload of customers and they will be, destroyed by a lot of other businesses that will outcompete them, and people will disassociate with that type of behavior, because I don't think any business will ever have like the actual ignorant behavior to come out of their way and try to form that type of infrastructure, because one, that's way too expensive. Two, that destroys the relationship that they have with customers. So therefore they're already done with their support system. And then on top of that, with other businesses that they want to have connections with, that's going to be cut off too. So
okay, the problem is
wait, stop. Go ahead, Marcy.
Oh, okay. So the problem is you're assuming that like competition is going to take down these entities and so on, but this implies like this fantasy of like, like this fantasy of perpetual competition, right? Like in the event of competition, which isn't at least, like I'm not arguing for the libertarian position here, but in the event of like unmitigated competition, which is in no way refereed by a state or so on, you have no guarantee that somebody isn't going to. In fact, it's probably going to be the case that a certain entity wins this competition, and once they win this competition, they have more money than the other competition, and they can hire more private security and more armed guards to forcefully take away other all of their other competition. Who's going to stop them from doing so? Not the state in your ideal society. So it's very easy in the absence of a state in an ANCAP society to form this sort of private dictatorship style monopoly. All it takes is for one company to get the upper hand over the other companies, and then it's this snowball effect starts to take place.
Yeah, at the end of the day, one company will like rule them all, right? At the end of the day, like one company more or less would own majority of like wherever this is implemented, right? So wouldn't you just have a new state, but just a feel like corporate, like oligarchical dictatorship,
Well, Porky, I disagree with you there, because I think that actually like the vast majority of monopolies actually stem from regulatory failures through government and through state. I guess I'm not an ANCAP, but the ANCAP.
What stops like the biggest corporation with the biggest army to just fucking like destroy everyone?
Okay. Well, I agree with you to an extent, Daniel, but the problem is, why do these regulatory failures happen and cause monopolies? Well, it's because one company gains the competitive edge over the other companies. He has more money, and then in the context of society, subsequently has more power and can use that power to influence politicians to enact laws which disproportionately benefit them. The same thing would happen under an anarcho-capitalist society.
No, but I think the whole,
like as soon as they gain more influence. Yeah, no. I'm just
and the whole argument for the ANCAPs would be like, oh, without no state, no problem. If there wasn't a state for corporations to manipulate them, there would be no regulatory failures.
But what this guy is saying is like, well, these regulatory failures happen because companies use their money and their influence to influence the state, which enacts force to regulate society to work in their favor. Yeah. This guy that we're talking to, the ANCAP, sorry, I forgot his name, is advocating for this same system just through private security and so on. So like we have every reason to believe the same thing would happen, only it would be more pernicious because there would be no mitigating factors. You know what I mean?
What are your thoughts on this, Kiernan?
I wholeheartedly disagree with this point, because if I were to run my own company, I would not want to advocate for this, because why would any consumer want to come back and purchase my things again if I'm going to advocate for violence? That's like saying,
because they don't really have a choice.
Hold on. Let me finish, please. If I'm going to do something that evil, then I'm going to lose a lot of money. I'm going to lose support. My reputation for my company is going to go down, and I'm going to be taken out. Like nobody would ever think like this, because
sure.
I have never seen any business come out of their way and do that.
Because the state prevents. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Oh my God. No.
Let me finish.
Listen.
Let me finish. Stop cutting me off.
Okay, you're not making any sense.
The reason why that happens is because the state backs them, making them a corporation, which is a legal document by law to protect any company from screwing up. That is why you've seen BP have that oil spill back in 2011, which screwed up most of the natural resources in the Atlantic. Hold on, let me finish. That is why McDonald's had their horrible pink slime, case where everybody was being all sick and everything, where they were eating their burgers, and that's what gotten so many people sick, and that's why they've even labeled their burgers as murder burgers. That is how businesses can get away with that, because they go to the state to protect themselves from any legal issues that may strike back at them. But without that, they would be held accountable like any other individual or group of people. because I for one would never go back to a business that would try to point guns at me to purchase their own products.
No. Okay. The problem is you're talking about the state and how corporations influence the state. How can corporations influence the state? Well, the state is just an entity which enacts force to impose the will of one class over another. That's kind of irrelevant, though. The state is just an entity that enacts force to keep things in order. Right? So a corporation, if they win out over their competitors, can use their money and their influence to influence the state, to influence legislators to back them. Right? And all the state does is enforce violence. You just want this, the role of the state to be taken over by these private enforcement companies, whatever you called them. So there would still be a system which enacts force, right? Like corporations would still be able to use their power and influence to manipulate existing power structures which enact force to keep things in order. This would in no way change under an anarcho-capitalist society. It would just be different labels for the same occurrence of corporations using their influence to influence the existing power structures who use force to keep things in order. You're literally just changing the labels. This occurrence is not going to go away in the absence of the state. Like, I don't understand your inability to grasp this concept. And not only this, but like you say that okay, somebody's property is whatever they can defend. And well, how do they defend something? By having property and being able to hire this private security and so on. So basically what you're advocating for is a system in which people can defend or people who have property are people who can defend their property, and people who can defend their property are people who have the money to hire these private security and so on. So you're just arguing for this like egregious hierarchical system in which people can gain more and more property by having more and more money and enforcing this property. Like, the more money somebody gets, the more they can enforce their will, and the more they can enforce their will, the more money they get. The fact that you don't understand how this will lead to this monopoly, this private dictatorship structure is and you talked about how people will just go to other companies. They're not going to really have a choice if a certain company wins over its competitors and uses the money they have to hire more private security, which use their power to, knock out all other competition. Who's going to stop them from doing that? Not a state. So they essentially have the power, if they have enough money, to knock out all other competition by any means necessary. And the people aren't going to really have a choice to just go to some other company. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand where you're coming from.
All right. Can I talk now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, one, I don't think that will ever happen because, one, I don't see any business doing this right now. So therefore, hold on, let me finish.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
Damn, bro, stop cutting me off. Okay, so back to what I was saying. If anybody were to ever do this, I think that the moral, rational people that see this as consumers would want to hold this business or anybody else that would do this accountable. So therefore, in my own view, I don't have the answers for everything. So I'm just trying to come out with my own solution. If there were this so-called evil corporation that y'all want to try to bring up to say that's going to take over and try to hurt people, who's to say that people cannot expose this company for what they're doing? And then, but then on top of that, like you say that competition would be bought out. How so? When you're going up against billions upon billions of firms that will be created, and therefore, I don't think every firm would want to have their business bought out by a corrupt company, because that will strike up against them for individuals to say, wait a minute, if these businesses are being bought out by this other business to try to form some sort of monopolistic empire, then people would be I'm not messing with this company. So therefore, people will mutually come together and expose these companies for what they're doing wrong. And therefore, when there's more accountability made, people will form up better solutions to take out these issues. Because I, for one, would not want to see this happen. I don't want you to be like affected by this, nor anybody else. So therefore, in my own best, morality, I would try to find that proper solution that could be fixed. So that way, anybody that tries to act like that can be held accountable to those standards. And that way, I can have my own services that I subscribe to have those lawsuits or cases up against them. So that way there is proper accountability made for those corrupt people that are doing those bad things.
Okay, the problem is you're making this argument from like, oh, the people have this power to hold these corporations accountable. Whereas the problem with this argument is that power as defined under your society is just property, right? Like property is what you can defend. What you defend your property by having money and being able to hire these private security forces. So like there's literally no law preventing these corporations from taking away the rights of the people to hold them accountable. All that they need to do so is property, and all that they need to have property and the influence to do that. The only thing that they need to do to acquire the property and influence to take away the rights of these people, which they're not barred from doing because there's no state, is winning out over the competition, which literally happens all the time, which you have no reason to assume wouldn't happen under an anarcho-capitalist society. Okay, well, how would you know that? Because other people have different interests for what they want to get into. Like, I don't see any. Hold on. Let me explain my case here. I don't see any company having the interest of doing bad to other people because they are reliant to the consumers that need them to come back. And then on top of that, their reputation is important too. Yes, it is. That's what every business has. Only if it's good for profit.
No, it's not.
Only if it's good for profit, dude. Are you familiar with the 2008 financial collapse?
Bro, let me finish.
Oh my God.
I don't think
you're going over points we've already talked about.
Bro, let me finish.
Okay, then bring up something new.
I'm not cutting you off, so let me talk.
Feel free to cut me off if you have anything.
Let me talk.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't like going back and forth and trying to cut people off. I like to give people respect to talk.
Okay, go ahead.
Please give me respect. Okay.
Go ahead.
So as far as what I'm trying to say is that I have never seen anybody come out of their way do this because I know people that actually run their own businesses and they tell me their reputation is important. It is not for profit. You have to have a good relationship with your consumers or else you will lose your company and you will lose support because that is how quick people will lose their own money. It is not just for profits. If people thought like that, that would just literally go down through like the drain so quick because businesses know that if they do that and try to do something that evil, they're going to lose so much money. I mean, like you've seen it with, hold on, let me finish. Stop cutting me off.
Dude, I wasn't interrupting you. I just said one word. Go ahead. Go ahead. Just please.
Okay.
Just please finish your point.
When you see businesses do these bad things, like for instance, when United Airlines tried forcing that one customer out of the plane for like other people, they lost so much money that one day that they literally had to go bankrupt. I mean, seriously, they could have literally just been gone tomorrow because everybody hated them. Okay. And then on top of that, with other businesses like Netflix, when they tried raising their prices, like that one year, I believe it was like 2017. Everybody was like, screw that, cancel, unsubscribe. I'm going out to Hulu. And that made Netflix lose so much money. Like, seriously, they could be gone tomorrow. That is how quickly people take out other markets that try to act up. Same thing with Facebook, same thing with Google, same thing with Microsoft. There are always other alternatives. No matter how much control this, one business wants to gain control over other businesses, people create other alternatives to hold those companies accountable and make them lose their own support over time. All right, I'm done.
Okay. I don't know how you're making this argument, because my initial claim was that businesses only value their reputation because having a good reputation is profitable for them. And your rebuttal was no, they value their reputation because if they ruin their reputation, they're going to lose a lot of money. That's literally the claim I was making.
You're cutting off.
What we can see from this is that the overarching motive is profit.
Mario, you cut off.
Okay. So, what I'm saying is that my initial claim was that companies only care about their reputation because having a good reputation is profitable. Your rebuttal is that no, companies care about their reputation because if they spoil their reputation and do something bad, they'll lose a lot of money. That's literally the exact claim I'm making. You literally only confirmed my initial point. So what we can deduce from this is that the overarching motive, while in the context of our current society, reputation is essential to making profit. If this premise that, having a good reputation is essential to making profit was thrown out the window, reputation would no longer be valuable to a company, because the overarching motive of any company is to accumulate greater profit, which you literally admitted in that entire argument you just made. So if we are in the context of a society in which the people don't have the power to hold these companies accountable, this necessity for a good reputation in order to accumulate greater profit will go completely out the window. And I would argue this could very easily happen in the case of an anarcho-capitalist society, because companies would not be restrained by a government from limiting the rights of the people to hold them accountable, because power is only defined by how much property you have. And okay, that's about the extent of my point. But I guess I'm struggling to see what your argument is.
Okay, look, I don't have the answers to everything, and I understand where you're coming from, and that's good, because I need to know what problems that could exist in the society that I push for. But the thing is that I don't want people to be aggressed upon, and I will try to find, certain resources that I can link onto to help those people out. Granted, if there is something that is flawed, then let's make alternatives for it. I don't need to force a massive population just to use violence just to get something done, because it's just never going to work anyway. And I kind of feel like that pretty much fails at the whole point of the problem, because it's just going to make the problem grow. See, now, as far as what you're saying, that could be a possibility, but then again, I do believe that people will call them out, and people will come together. I don't see myself just to let things happen, and therefore I don't have anything to say about it. If I see something wrong, then I will call it out.
Wait. Okay, so
okay.
Wait, I just need to go through this. Okay, so you're saying in this anarcho-capitalist society, there will always be competition. No one company will eventually win over all the other. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, everybody's free to create whatever services that they want to create, based on the explicit consent of the people that want those things there.
Okay, so okay. All right, Porky, you say what you're going to say, and then I'm just going to make one final comment, and then I'm going to have to end it because I don't really have any more time to continue this, or I don't have a ton more time.
Yeah, basically, I just don't see how in this anarcho-capitalist society, the company with the most capital, with the most money and the most influence and the biggest security force, or whatever you want to call it, isn't just gonna come out on top, and is just gonna squash all competition at the end of the day, and either have majority of this country or whatever you're implementing anarcho-capitalism in, or just having full dominance over every other corporation, right? So that's basically what we're saying. And you're just saying, okay, but if a company Wait, so if a company is doing this, right, the people will come together and will expose this company. But how, if the company has much more money and influence than them, they can just buy reporters, buy news agencies to propagate their view of the situation.
Yeah.
And if finally the workers or the people are just tired of this evil company, they're just gonna come out and gonna fight this company. Aren't you just saying like, yes, my system will inevitably lead to a civil war?
Yeah, and so like not only that, okay, this is just going to be my final comment, but I just wanted to say that your whole entire argument, your whole entire reason of, oh, the people can just rebel, insists that the people under an anarcho-capitalist system have this intrinsic freedom of speech, have this intrinsic freedom to do this and this and this. No, the people have the freedom which is defined by those in power. In an anarcho-capitalist society, those in power, as you stated earlier in your initial premise, are people who have property. So people have the freedom that those with money and power allow them to have. And so like this whole argument from, oh, the people have the freedom to do this, oh, the people have the freedom to do that. Not if it benefits the corporation in power, they don't. Because they don't have any freedom guaranteed by a state. They have the freedom, to the extent of which is useful to the corporations who directly benefit from exploiting them, which I think is an inherently unstable and exploitative system. But anyways, that was just my final comment. We have to... I think I have to go now. So if anybody
what about Max? What about Max?
We're gonna reschedule your debate with Max for like next week.
Thanks, Kieran, for coming on. It was a lot of fun having you on. Really fun being able to talk to an ANCAP and have a really lively debate. We thank you all for watching the 3rd episode of the Children of the Light podcast. We'll see you next week.
Sorry, you cut out.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Okay. Yeah. See ya.